Okay, my mathematicians, today I want to go through the factoring polynomials test review. I'm going to work through these problems with you, and that way you have an answer key so you can better prepare for our test. So let's look at the first one. It is asking what are the factors of the following polynomial, the following expression. So as always, first I'm going to check, is it in standard form? It is. Second, is there anything I can immediately take a greatest common factor out? Can we divide anything out of it? And there's not. So here I am going just to be factoring, and so I'll still use my ACB method. So ABC, so I want to identify my A value is that 10, my B value is negative 19, my C value is 6. And then I'm going to create my t-chart. So I have A times C equals B. So A times C is 60 and equals B is negative 19. Okay. Now I need to find two numbers that will multiply to give me a positive 60, but when I add them together will give me a negative 19. So when I go through all of my factors, I find that negative 15 times negative 4 gives me a positive 60, but negative 15 plus negative 4 give me a negative 19. So these are going to be my factors. As my next step, I'm going to put these into my box. You know, I told you my X box method, and I'm going to go ahead and factor out of my box. So in the top of my box is going to go my A value, which is 10x squared. The right-hand corner of my box will be my C value, which is 6. And then in the corners is going to be these factors that I found. So I'll use negative 15. And remember, we got to attach the X, and negative 4 and attach the X. And the great thing about those corners is it does not matter which one goes in these corners here that I'm highlighting. Okay. Now I'm just going to factor out of the box. If I look at this column, so the first column, what do they have in common? What can I divide out of each of them? Well, it's easy to see they have an X in common. And then they also have a 2 in common. They're both even. I can always divide a 2 out of an even number. And because that first box is positive, I am going to take a positive 2. Now I'm going to look at this second column. I have negative 15 and 6. Well, I know they're both divisible by 3. And because this first box that I come to in my column is negative, I'm going to take a negative 3 with it. And now I'll do the same thing with my rows. 10x squared minus 15x. Well, I know they both have an x in common. They are both divisible by 5, so I can pull a 5x out of each of those boxes. And then last, I have a negative 4x and a 6. So I can't pull an x because that 6 doesn't have an x, but I know 4 and 6 are even numbers, so I can pull a 2. And because this box here, that first box I come to, is a negative, I'm going to pull a negative 2. So the two factors that I am left with up top are my 2x minus 3 and 5x minus 2. And I'm pretty sure those are my factors, so we can always check. Remember, I can take these, and you can either put them back into the box, we're just going to multiply them, or I can FOIL, and I'll FOIL these for you. So I have 2 times 5x is 10x squared, and 2x times 2x is negative 4x, and now I'm going to do the inner. Negative 3 times 5x is negative 15x. And then the outer, negative 3 times negative 2 is positive 6. Now I'm going to combine like terms. So negative 4x minus 15x is negative 19x. And then I'm going to bring down my 6 and bring down my 10x squared. And these match. So I know that these two are my factors. So one of my factors is 2x minus 3. And the other factor is 5x minus 2. So looking at number 2, this is somewhat of a word problem about my backyard, the backyard that Jeter runs around and plays in. So it gives me that I have a rectangular yard, and it gives me the polynomial and square unit, and it wants to know the dimensions. Well, first I notice that it tells me it's the area, and it's a rectangle. So what do you know about area and rectangle? Well, isn't area just length times width? So I know the total, I know my A value, but I need to find my length times width. So you can do this one of two ways. You could either take all of your answer choices, notice they are all multiple choice, and you can work backwards. You can FOIL or box these, multiply them out, and see which one is going to give me my 2x squared minus 7x plus 21. Or you can factor this. So I'm just going to go the factoring route. Okay, so once again, we're checking whenever we factor, is it in standard form? It is. The next is, can I divide anything out? I cannot. Okay, so now I'm going to identify my A, B, and C. My A value is 2. My B value is negative 17, and my C value is positive 21. Now I'm going to make my T-chart. A times C equals B. So if I multiply 2 times 21, I get 42. And now I need a B value of negative 17. So here I need two numbers that will multiply to give me 42, but when I add them together will give me a negative 17. So when I go through all of my factors of 42, I find that I have 3 and 14. And in order to get that as a negative 17 but a positive 2, well, both of these have to be negative. So I found both of my factors, and now I'm going to put them into my box and factor these out. So once again, the upper left-hand corner is going to be my A value, which the size of my backyard is 2x squared. Lower right hand is going to be my C value, which is 21. And then I'm going to put my factors, and it doesn't matter which one goes in the corner boxes. I can put them in any order. I just have to remember to attach that variable to it. So I have negative 3x and negative 14x. And now I'm going to factor them out. So let's look at our column, 2x squared negative 14x. Well, they have a 2 in common and they have an x in common. And now I have negative 3x and 21. Well, they have a 3 in common, and because the first box I come to has a negative, that's going to be that negative 3. You should already be able to find your answer, but let's just kind of keep on checking. So here's my row. What do they have in common? They have an x. And then last, negative 14x and 21, well, they have a 7 in common, and because that first box is negative, it's going to be a negative 7. So now I have my two factors, 2x minus 3, x minus 7, and it looks like this answer choice right here. Here is number 3. It gave me the expression and gave me only half of the factored form. It gave me that one of the factors is d plus 2, and it's asking what is the other one. So it's d plus whatever that k is. Here you're going to have to do a little bit of work. We're going to have to factor this. So I can still use my ABC method. Okay, I'm already checking. It's in standard form. There is nothing to divide out. So I know I have an A value of 1, a B value of negative 1. Okay, be careful there because that's negative, so that's negative 1. A C value of negative 6. And now I'm going to do my T-chart. A times C equals B, so negative 6 and negative 1. Now you need to find your factors. I hope you are easily able to come up with a 3 and a 2. And for that 3 and 2 to be a -6, one of those have to be negative, and for it to be -1, so that is going to be here, that -3 and +2, which kind of matches, right? Because don't you see we have a +2 right here. And now, just for some practice, we are going to factor this. Now remember, this only works when our a value is 1. Because our a value is 1, instead of doing the reverse box method, I can strictly just group these together. I'm going to split my d's. And then in one box is going to be my -3. And my other box is going to be my +2. So it's asking me what is the value of k. Well, I already know they have this d plus 2, so they already have that as that factor form. So what they're looking for is, what is this number? So here the answer is going to be -3. So let's look at this one. Okay, which expression is equivalent? Gave me -16x squared plus 4x. Well, it should look familiar. We did warm up on it, but let's just kind of review this. So same thing. I'm just going to go through the steps. Is it in factored form? I mean, is it in standard form? It is. Everything is on the same side. Okay. Next step, can I divide anything out? Well, yeah, I can. They're both divisible by 4. They both have an x in common. Be careful with these, because this is a step I see many of you that are kind of glancing over. We forget. It causes us more work. So let me just write this so it's bigger. So I know that both of them have an x in common. Both of them are divisible by 4. And because the first term, that a term, is negative, I'm going to take out a -4x from both of these equations. So when I do that, I'm left with -16 divided by -4 is +4. And how many x's? Well, the law of exponents tells me that I'm going to subtract the exponent, so I'm left with 1x. And then over here, a +4x divided by a -4x is -1. So I'm left with one factor. And now I have to remember, even before I started, I had pulled out this -4x, so I'm going to stick this in front. And this expression is equivalent. So -4x times 4x minus 1. And keep in mind, you could have always worked backwards. We could have always just kind of distribute. So I knew that would have been 16x squared. That wouldn't work. That wouldn't work. I knew it had to be one of these with the negatives. Problem number 5 is asking which expression is a factor of this polynomial expression. So here, we're going to have to factor it. We cannot work backwards because they just gave us some individual factors. No, we already checked. Standard form? Yes. Anything that can be divided out? No. So identify your A, your B, and your C. Remember, your A, your B, and your C are just the coefficients. So here my A value is 1. My B value is 2. My C value is -15. And now I'm going to draw my T-chart. I have A times C, B. So A times C is -15 and B is 2. So now I'm looking for two numbers that will multiply to give me a -15, but add together to give me a 2. Well, I know I could do 5 times -3, give me a -15. And if I do 5 minus 3, I get a +2. Now from here, we can either put it in the box or we can split it. So I'm just going to group it, save myself some work. I can split it because that A value is 1. So I'm going to split that x. And in 1, I have a 5, which is positive, so it's going to be x plus 5. And in the other, my other factor is -3, x minus 3. So my answer choice either has to be an x plus 5 or x minus 3. Well, it can't be not A. Can't be B. Be careful with C. Look what they did to C. C, I put in X minus 5, so it's not C. So the only one that is there is going to be answer choice D. Okay, let's look at number 7, looking for an equivalent expression to 4x squared minus 81. Once again, it's multiple choice, so you can work backwards. Or let's see if we can factor this. So I'm hoping that you notice the first thing when I look at this. What did you notice it's missing? Did you know it's missing that B value? And both terms are separated by a negative. So when I see that, the first thing I'm going to look at is I'm going to look at both of my terms and try to decide, are these perfect squares? Well, let's see. What is the square root of 4? The square root of 4 equals 2. Well, that's a perfect square. What is the square root of x squared? Well, x times x is x squared, so the square root of x squared is x. That's a perfect square. And then I'm left with the square root of 81. Well, square root of 81 is 9, so that's a perfect square. And both of my terms are separated by a subtraction sign. So here is an ideal example that I can save myself that work of doing my ACB method, and I can use my difference of squares. My difference of squares says that if I have two terms and both terms are perfect squares and they are connected with that subtraction sign, I can take the square root of both of the terms, okay, which I did, and one is going to be positive, so I have 2x plus 9, and the other one is going to be negative, 2x minus 9. Okay, number 8. Ooh, find the difference of the two expressions. Something different. We're not factoring here. We're just adding or subtracting polynomials. Okay, so I'm looking at the expression, and even if I go through our normal solving equations that don't call me after midnight, what's the first thing I do? Well, I'm going to distribute. So here I notice a 4. I'm going to distribute that 4 just to everything in this polynomial. So when I do so, I have a 12y squared minus 8y plus 4. And next, I have to distribute one more item. Did you notice it here? Here's that negative, and we know that the coefficient behind that negative is a 1. I'm going to distribute a 1 to everything inside. So now that leaves me with a negative y squared plus a 2y minus a 3. And now that I have done this, I can add those polynomials together. Okay, remember, adding and subtracting polynomials is just combining like terms. Okay, I like to stack mine vertically so I can line up my like terms. So here with my first term, I have my y's. So I have 12 minus 1y. So that's going to leave me with 11y squared. And now I have negative 8 plus 2y. That leaves me with a negative 6y. And then a 4 plus a negative 3. That leaves me with a positive 1. So the difference here is 11y squared minus 6y plus 1, and that is answer choice A. As I always say, please watch your negatives on this one. It's very tricky, and negatives will make a difference. Okay, last but not least, which expression is equivalent to this binomial multiplication problem? I threw this in here because, as you saw from our answer choices, many of these you can always check by just multiplying. So here it's just strict multiplication. We can either use FOIL or box method. So let's do box method. I think many of you like the box. Okay. So on top, I'm going to write my 2a plus 5. On the side, a 3a minus 2. And now I'm going to multiply my boxes. So my first box, I have 3a times 2a. Well, that is 6, and I have 2a's, a squared. My second box, I have 3a times 5a, which is 15a. And now I'll go down to the bottom row. Negative 2 times 2a is negative 4a. And negative 2 times positive 5 is negative 10. Okay. Now I'm going to pull all of these items out of the box. So looking at my 6a squared, there's not another term I can combine. So this one is just going to 6a squared. Looking at my 15a, do I have another term that's alike that I can combine? Well, right here, I can combine my 15a and my negative 4a. So 15 minus 4 is positive 11, and I have an a. And then last, I have my negative 10. There's nothing to combine, so I'm just left with negative 10. So my answer is 6a squared plus 11a minus 10. I hope this review was helpful. I cannot stress enough to please practice. Always check your answer, show your work.